I still remember the sound of the file cabinet, metal on metal, a sharp scrape, like something being dragged out of my life without permission. I stood in the hallway barefoot on cold tile, listening, not moving, not breathing right, because I already knew something was wrong. And the woman I called my stepmother was standing inside my father's office, touching things that were never meant for her. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever faced betrayal, hit like and subscribe, because what happened next will shock you. My dad had been gone for exactly 11 days. 11 days since the hospital room went quiet. 11 days since his hand slipped out of mine. 11 days since the house stopped feeling like home. The funeral had barely ended before she changed. Vivian. That was her name. She went from grieving widow to acting landlord overnight. Locks clicked differently. Rooms felt smaller. And suddenly, everything that used to be ours became hers. I noticed it first in the way she walked through the house. Slow, confident, like she was counting steps. My father's office had always been off limits growing up. Not because he was secretive, but because that room was his mind. Ledgers, folders, legal envelopes, old photographs tucked into drawers. He used to say, "Some things aren't meant to be explained. They're meant to be protected." Now the door was open. I stood at the end of the hall and watched Vivian pull out drawer after drawer. Papers stacked, folders flipped, documents skimmed fast, like she already knew what she was looking for. My stomach tightened. "Can I help you find something?" I asked. She didn't jump, didn't flinch. That scared me more than anything. She turned slowly and smiled. A thin smile, the kind that never reaches the eyes. "I'm just organizing," she said. "Your father was messy." That word hit wrong. My father was many things. Messy wasn't one of them. I stepped into the room. The air smelled like old paper and lemon polish. The window was open just enough for traffic noise to bleed in. Horns, engines, life moving on without him. I looked at the desk. The top drawer was empty. That drawer had always held one thing, the inheritance folder. Dad never hid the fact that he'd planned carefully. He'd built his business from nothing. Night shifts, loans, risks that kept him awake for years. And he told me clearly that everything was documented. "You won't have to fight anyone," he once said. I made sure of that. Now the drawer was bare. "Where are the documents?" I asked. Vivian closed the file cabinet with a soft click. "What documents?" she replied. Her voice was calm, too calm. "The estate papers, Vincent, the business filings, the trust." She laughed lightly. "Like I just asked something childish." "Oh, sweetheart," she said, "there is no trust." The room felt like it tilted. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline that never came. "My dad showed me the folder," I said. "He went over it with me." Vivian walked past me and sat in my father's chair. His chair. She crossed her legs and leaned back. "Well," she said, "people say a lot of things when they're sick." That's when the betrayal stopped whispering and started speaking clearly. I felt heat rush to my face. My hands shook, but I didn't let her see it. "You're saying everything he built just disappears?" I asked. She shrugged. "Legally," she said, "I'm his wife." That word again. Legally. She opened a slim folder and tapped it with one finger. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," she continued. "Everything will be handled." Handled. Like I was an inconvenience. Like I was furniture that hadn't been moved yet. "What about me?" I asked quietly. She looked at me then. Really looked. And something cold passed between us. "You're grown," she said. "You'll be fine." I walked out before she could see my eyes fill. That night, I barely slept. The house creaked in ways it never had before. Every sound felt like something else being taken. I replayed every conversation I'd ever had with my dad, every promise, every reassurance. None of it made sense. Unless someone had erased the proof. The next morning, I went back into the office while Vivian was out. The desk was spotless, too spotless, files gone, cabinet empty. But my father had taught me something about secrets. You never put the most important thing where everyone expects it. I dropped to my knees and ran my fingers along the bottom drawer. The underside, the back panel. Nothing. I checked the bookshelf, behind the framed awards, behind the old family photos. Still nothing. Frustration burned in my chest. Then I noticed it. The safe, small, black, half hidden behind a row of law books. My heart started pounding. I'd seen it once, years ago. Dad had smiled when he caught me staring at it. "That one's not for today," he'd said. I knelt in front of it now. The keypad was dark. I pressed a number. Nothing. Another. Still nothing. Then I remembered. My birthday. I entered the date. The safe beeped and opened. Inside wasn't money, wasn't jewelry. It was a thick sealed folder, red tab, handwritten label, and 3 words that made my blood run cold. If Vivian lies. My hands froze in midair, because in that moment, I knew my father had seen this coming, and whatever was inside that folder was about to change everything. I didn't open it right away. My hands hovered there, shaking like the paper might burn me if I touched it. The house felt too quiet. Even the refrigerator hum sounded loud, intrusive, like it was listening. I closed the safe, not because I was scared of the truth, but because I was scared of who might walk in while I was reading it. Vivian's heels had a sound, sharp, deliberate. I memorized it without realizing. I slid the folder into my hoodie, pressed it flat against my chest, and stepped out of the office. The hallway light flickered once, then steadied. My father always said flickering lights meant loose wiring. But that morning, it felt like a warning. I locked myself in my childhood bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped the same way it always had. The air still smelled faintly like lavender from the old sachets my aunt used to tuck into drawers. I opened the folder. Inside were copies, not originals. That mattered. My father had planned for theft. The first page was a typed letter, dated 6 months before he died. His handwriting filled the margins. Small notes, underlines, arrows. I recognized his voice immediately. "If you're reading this," the letter began, "then Vivian has already tried to take control." My throat tightened. He wasn't guessing. He knew. The letter explained everything slowly, carefully, like he was sitting across from me at the kitchen table again, coffee cooling between us. He discovered missing documents weeks after his diagnosis: deeds, business registration papers, insurance policies. At first, he thought he'd misplaced them. Then he checked the security cameras. The next page was a printed still image. Vivian, in this room, late at night. My breath caught. The timestamp burned into the corner of the image. 2:17 a.m. She was holding a file. Another page. Another still. Her back turned, sliding papers into her bag. I pressed my hand to my mouth. This wasn't suspicion. This was proof. The letter continued. "I didn't confront her," he wrote. "I needed to see how far she'd go." The words blurred for a second as my eyes filled. He explained how he'd quietly created duplicate records, how he'd moved critical assets into a trust she couldn't access, how he'd changed beneficiary designations on policies she didn't even know existed. Then came the part that made my chest ache. "I didn't tell you," he wrote, "because I didn't want you living in fear." I let out a shaky breath. He always did that, protected me even when it hurt him. The last section of the folder was thicker. Legal correspondence, emails, a notarized affidavit from his attorney, and one audio transcript, a recorded conversation. between Vivian and someone else. I skimmed the first lines and felt my stomach drop. She wasn't just stealing, she was planning. The bedroom door creaked. I snapped the folder shut and shoved it under the pillow just as footsteps stopped outside. A pause. Then a soft knock. "Sweetheart," Vivian called, "can we talk?" My heart slammed against my ribs. I stood slowly, wiped my eyes, and opened the door. She smiled again. That same careful smile. "I'm making lunch," she said. "You should eat." Her gaze flicked just for a second to the bed behind me. I stepped into the hallway blocking her view. "I'm not hungry," I said. She tilted her head. "You barely touched breakfast." Concern or calculation. "I'll eat later," I replied. She studied my face longer than necessary, then nodded. "All right," she said, "but we should discuss arrangements soon." Arrangements. For me. I waited until I heard the kitchen cabinets open before locking the door again. My hands were slick with sweat as I pulled the folder back out. The audio transcript was labeled clearly, recorded with consent. My father had been thorough. The conversation had taken place in the garage. Vivian's voice jumped off the page, impatient, sharp. She was talking to her brother about selling the house, about dissolving the business, about moving money before she asked questions. She meant me. The worst part wasn't the greed. It was the confidence. She spoke like I was already gone, like I didn't exist. I sat there for a long time, listening to the sounds of the house, reading and rereading the pages until the words stopped shaking. By evening, I knew two things. One, my father had outsmarted her. Two, she didn't know it yet. And that made this dangerous. Because people like Vivian didn't stop when they thought they were winning. They stopped when they were exposed. Dinner was quiet. She talked about logistics, about paperwork, about how exhausting grief was. I nodded, answered carefully, played small. She reached across the table at one point and patted my hand, a gesture meant to look kind. Her nails were perfectly manicured, red, the same red as the folder tab. I almost pulled my hand away. Almost. That night, I lay awake listening to her move around the house. At 1:46 a.m., her door opened. At 1:49, it closed again. At 2:03, I heard the office door. My chest tightened. She was looking again. I stayed still, counted breaths, waited. In the morning, the office was locked. She stood in the kitchen drinking coffee like nothing had happened. "I think we'll go to the lawyer tomorrow," she said casually, "just to make things official." Official. I looked at her over my mug and smiled, because by then I'd already called my father's attorney, and he had one question for me that echoed in my head all day. "Do you want to confront her?" he'd asked, "or do you want to let her lie, under oath?" That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something terrifying. Vivian thought the truth was gone. And tomorrow, she was about to bet everything on that belief. Vivian drove. That alone told me everything. She wore black sunglasses, even though the sky was gray, her lips pressed into a thin line like she was already rehearsing what she'd say. One hand on the wheel, the other tapping lightly, impatiently, against the door. I watched the city pass by through the passenger window. Brick buildings, bus stops, people carrying groceries, laughing, living normal lives. Mine felt paused. The law office sat on a quiet street, clean and polished, the kind of place that smelled like coffee and copier ink. Glass doors, neutral art on the walls. Vivian walked in like she owned the air. I followed, calm on the outside, my heart pounding so loud I was sure the receptionist could hear it. "Mrs. Carter," the receptionist said warmly, "Mr. Reynolds is expecting you." Reynolds, my father's attorney. Vivian smiled, satisfied. She didn't notice how my shoulders relaxed just a little. The conference room was cool, lit by soft overhead lights, a long table, a pitcher of water, neatly stacked folders at one end. Mr. Reynolds stood when we entered, tall, gray at the temples, eyes sharp but kind. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, shaking Vivian's hand. She squeezed his fingers a beat too long. "Thank you," she replied. "It's been overwhelming." I took my seat quietly. Mr. Reynolds looked at me next. "And you must be his daughter," he said. I nodded. His gaze held mine for half a second longer than necessary. A silent acknowledgement. Vivian cleared her throat. "Shall we begin?" she said. "Straight to business." Mr. Reynolds opened a folder. "Before we do," he said calmly, "I need to clarify something." Vivian leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Of course. This meeting is being recorded," he continued, "with consent from all present parties." Vivian's smile tightened. "That won't be necessary," she said quickly. "We trust each other." Mr. Reynolds didn't flinch. "It's standard," he replied. "And it was requested." She glanced at me, just once. I met her eyes, didn't blink. She forced a small laugh. "Well," she said, "if it helps keep things clear." The recorder clicked on. That sound echoed in my chest. Mr. Reynolds slid a document across the table. "According to the will on file," he began, "Mr. Carter established a living trust 3 years ago." Vivian frowned. "A what?" "A living trust," he repeated. "One that predates the marriage." The room shifted. She straightened in her chair. "That can't be right," she said. "My husband handled everything himself." Mr. Reynolds nodded slowly. "He did," he said, "very carefully." He turned to another page. "The trust names his daughter as primary beneficiary." Silence. Heavy. Thick. Vivian laughed. Sharp. Incredulous. "That's impossible," she said. "There was no trust." Mr. Reynolds looked up. "There is," he replied, "and it's fully funded." Her face changed then. Not grief, not confusion. Anger. "You're telling me," she said slowly, "that after everything I did for him—" "This isn't about feelings," Mr. Reynolds interrupted gently. "It's about documentation." Vivian pushed her chair back slightly. "I saw every paper in that house," she snapped. "There was nothing." I felt my pulse spike. Mr. Reynolds folded his hands. "That's interesting," he said, "because our records show multiple attempts to remove documents from the property." Vivian froze, just for a fraction of a second. Then she scoffed. "Are you accusing me of something?" "No," he replied. "I'm stating facts." He slid another folder forward. Printed images spilled into view. Security stills. Timestamps. Her in the office. At night. The color drained from her face. "That's an invasion of privacy," she said quickly. "This is harassment." Mr. Reynolds didn't raise his voice. "These images were legally obtained," he said, "and they support concerns your husband documented before his passing." I watched her eyes dart, searching, calculating. She turned to me suddenly. "You knew about this?" she demanded. I inhaled slowly. "Yes," I said. Her lips parted. "You went behind my back?" I leaned forward. "You went through my father's things while he was dying," I replied quietly. The air snapped. Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat. "There's more," he said. Vivian slammed her palm on the table. "This is absurd," she said. "You think you can just rewrite history?" Mr. Reynolds pressed a button. The room filled with sound. Her voice, recorded, clear, talking about selling the house, moving money, keeping me out of it. She stared at the speaker like it had betrayed her. "Turn that off," she whispered. Mr. Reynolds did. Her shoulders sagged. For the first time, she looked unsure. "This conversation," he continued, "was recorded with consent under state law." Vivian swallowed. "You can't use that," she said weakly. "Oh, we can," he replied. "And we will." The room was silent again. Mr. Reynolds slid one final document across the table. This affidavit states that any attempt to conceal, destroy, or misrepresent estate documents would nullify spousal claims under the trust's fraud clause. Vivian's hands trembled. "What does that mean?" she asked. He met her eyes. "It means," he said evenly, "that your actions may disqualify you entirely." She turned to me. Panic flashed across her face. "You wouldn't let that happen?" she said softly. "We're family." The word felt poisonous. I stood. My legs felt steady. "I am my father's family," I said. She opened her mouth, closed it. Mr. Reynolds gathered the folders. "We'll be proceeding with a formal review," he said, "and notifying the court." Vivian sat back slowly, deflated. But as we walked out of that office, something cold settled in my stomach. Because as defeated as she looked, I recognized that expression. It wasn't surrender. It was rage being delayed. And I knew then, this wasn't over. Not even close. Vivian didn't speak on the drive back. Not a single word. The silence inside the car felt heavier than any argument. The engine hummed low. Turn signals clicked like a countdown. I stared straight ahead, watching her reflection in the windshield. Her jaw was tight, hands clenched around the steering wheel. This was the calm before something violent. When we pulled into the driveway, she parked crooked. Didn't correct it, didn't care. She got out without looking at me. The front door slammed so hard the walls shook. Inside, the house felt different, charged, like it knew a line had been crossed. Vivian dropped her purse on the table and turned on me. "You planned this," she said. Not loud, worse, controlled. "I followed my father's instructions," I replied. She laughed bitterly. "Your father," she said. "As if you knew him better than I did." I felt heat rise in my chest. "He was my dad," I said. "I knew him my entire life." She stepped closer. "And I was his wife," she snapped. "I took care of him when you weren't here." That stung, because part of it was true. "I was working," I said quietly, "because he told me to live my life." Her eyes flashed. "He didn't trust you enough to tell you everything," she said. "Clearly." I held her gaze. "He trusted me enough to protect me," I replied. That's when she broke. Her face twisted, the mask cracked. "You think you won?" she hissed. "You think some papers mean you've won?" She moved toward the stairs. I followed, my heart pounding. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Getting what's mine," she said. She went straight to the bedroom. Her bedroom. My father's bedroom. She yanked open drawers, throwing clothes aside. Shoes hit the floor. Jewelry clinked. "Stop," I said. "You can't just—" She pulled out a small lockbox from under the bed. Black, scratched. My breath caught. I'd never seen it before. She dropped it onto the bed and spun the dial furiously. It opened. Inside were documents, originals, deeds, insurance policies, the ones she said never existed. My hands shook. "You lied," I said. She turned slowly. "And you recorded me," she shot back. She grabbed the papers and shoved them into a tote bag. "I'm done playing nice," she said. "I'm calling my lawyer." She stormed past me, bag swinging. I ran downstairs and blocked the front door. "You can't take those," I said. "They're evidence." She leaned in close. "So call the police," she whispered. "And tell them what?" That's when I heard it. A soft click behind us. We both froze. The front door unlocked. A voice spoke from the hallway. "Actually," it said calmly, "you won't need to." A uniformed officer stepped inside, then another. Vivian spun around. "What is this?" she demanded. I turned too, and saw Mr. Reynolds behind them. His expression was grave. "Based on new information," he said, "we requested a welfare and property check." Vivian laughed sharply. "This is ridiculous." One officer held out his hand. "Ma'am," he said, We'll need to see what's in the bag. She clutched it tighter. No. The officer's voice hardened. That's not a request. Her eyes darted to me. Pure hatred. Slowly, she handed it over. The documents were laid out on the dining table. The room felt cold. Mr. Reynolds examined them carefully. These were reported missing, he said. Vivian's voice shook. I was safeguarding them. The officer raised an eyebrow. From whom? Silence. The second officer took notes. Ma'am, the first said, we're going to need you to come with us. Her mouth fell open. You can't be serious, she said. I live here. Mr. Reynolds spoke softly. For now, he said. She turned to me. You did this, she whispered. You destroyed everything. I swallowed hard. You destroyed it yourself, I replied. They escorted her to the door. As she crossed the threshold, she stopped, looked back at me, and smiled. Not a real smile, a promise. You better sleep with one eye open, she said quietly. This isn't over. The door closed behind her. The house went silent. I sank into a chair, shaking. But relief didn't come, because even with Vivian gone, something felt wrong. Mr. Reynolds gathered the papers. There's one more thing, he said. My stomach dropped. What? I asked. He hesitated. Your father's trust is secure, he said, but there's a pending challenge. My heart pounded. From who? He looked at me carefully. From someone claiming your father signed a later will. The room tilted. A later will? I whispered. Mr. Reynolds nodded. And the signature? He said slowly. Looks real. A later will. Those two words echoed in my head like a gunshot that never stopped ringing. I stood there gripping the back of the chair, trying to steady myself. The officers were gone. Vivian was gone. But the danger hadn't left with her. Who filed it? I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. Mr. Reynolds set the documents down carefully, like they might explode. It was submitted electronically, he said. 2 days after your father passed. 2 days. My chest tightened. That's impossible, I said. He was already unconscious. I know, he replied. That's why it raised flags. He pulled out another folder, thinner, darker. This document leaves everything, he continued, to Vivian. The room felt too small, too tight. She forged it, I said immediately. That's one possibility, he agreed. But the signature analysis isn't straightforward. I pressed my fingers to my temples. You're saying it could hold up? I'm saying, he replied carefully, that she planned for a backup. That word again, planned. Mr. Reynolds leaned closer. She didn't just steal documents, he said. She studied your father. I thought about the way she watched him, the way she listened, the night she stayed up late when he couldn't sleep. My stomach churned. When will the court review it? I asked. In 48 hours, he said. And Vivian will be there. I closed my eyes. She threatened me, I said, right before she left. Mr. Reynolds nodded. I'll request a temporary restraining order, he said. But you need to be careful. That night, I didn't stay in the house. Every shadow felt wrong, every sound too close. I stayed with a friend across town, lying awake on a couch that smelled like detergent and unfamiliar fabric. At 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at the screen, let it buzz. Then it stopped. A second later, a text came through. You don't know the whole story. My heart slammed. Another message. Your father wasn't who you think he was. My hands trembled as I typed. Who is this? The reply came instantly. Someone he lied to. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, Mr. Reynolds called early. There's been a development, he said. My pulse spiked. The will challenger hired a handwriting expert, he continued, and requested access to additional materials. What kind of materials? I asked. He paused. Audio, he said. Video, anything personal. I thought of the folder, the recordings. Can they get them? I asked. Only if the court orders it, he replied. But Vivian is pushing hard. Of course she was. By noon, my phone was full of missed calls, unknown numbers, voicemails left silent. By evening, one finally played. Vivian's voice, calm, measured. You're fighting the wrong battle, she said. There are things in your father's past you don't want exposed. I felt sick. What was she talking about? The hearing was the next morning. I barely ate, barely spoke. When I arrived at the courthouse, cameras were already outside. Media. How did they even know? Vivian stepped out of a black sedan across the street, perfectly dressed, hair flawless. She looked at me and smiled, confident again, like she had something new. Inside the courtroom, the judge reviewed preliminary filings. Vivian's attorney stood. We intend to demonstrate, he said, that the trust was created under undue influence. I stiffened. And that the later will, he continued, reflects Mr. Carter's true intentions. Mr. Reynolds rose calmly. We contest the validity, he said, and request the court review evidence of fraud. The judge nodded. Proceed, she said. Vivian's attorney pressed a button. The screen lit up. Video footage appeared. My breath caught. It was my father, sitting in his office, older, weaker. Vivian was beside him, her hand on his shoulder. He was speaking, and his words. They didn't sound like the man I knew. I want Vivian taken care of, he said slowly. She's done so much. The clip ended. The courtroom murmured. Vivian glanced at me, triumphant. Mr. Reynolds stood again. Your Honor, he said, that video is incomplete. Vivian's smile flickered. We request to play the full recording, he continued. The judge hesitated, then nodded. Play it. The video resumed. And this time, the truth finally began to surface. The screen flickered. The courtroom went quiet in a way that felt heavy, deliberate, like everyone sensed the ground was about to shift. The video resumed. My father's face filled the screen again. Tired eyes, shoulders slightly slumped. Vivian was still beside him. But this time the angle was wider, clearer. He took a breath. And I want this said clearly, he continued, his voice steadier now. Because I don't know who might try to twist my words later. My heart started pounding. Vivian's hand tightened on his shoulder. I saw it. So did the judge. My father glanced down at her hand, then gently moved it away. The courtroom stirred. If you're watching this, he said, looking directly into the camera, it means I'm no longer here to stop what I know is coming. Vivian's attorney shifted in his seat. My father leaned forward. I love my wife, he said carefully. But love doesn't mean blind trust. A sharp inhale rippled through the room. My assets, he continued, are protected under a trust for my daughter. I felt tears sting my eyes. And any document claiming otherwise, he said, especially one created near the end of my life. He paused. The silence was brutal. Should be questioned. The video didn't cut, didn't fade. It kept rolling. Vivian's voice came through next, soft, persuasive. You don't need to say all that, she murmured. My father looked at her. Really looked. I do, he replied. The courtroom froze. This recording, he continued, turning back to the camera, is my safeguard. Vivian's face on the screen hardened. You're making this complicated, she said. My father shook his head. No, he replied calmly. You are. The video timestamp jumped forward. New clip, same room, different day. My father's voice was weaker, but clearer. I've discovered documents missing, he said, and I believe they were taken intentionally. A murmur swept the courtroom. Vivian's attorney stood abruptly. Objection! The judge raised her hand. "Sit down," she said. The video kept playing. "If anyone presents a later will," my father said, "know this, I did not sign it willingly." The words hit like thunder. Vivian's attorney slowly sank back into his chair. My father exhaled. "I refuse to let greed erase my intentions," he said. "My daughter deserves the truth." The video ended. The screen went black. No one spoke, not even Vivian. The judge removed her glasses. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, "approach." They spoke quietly at the bench. I watched Vivian. Her composure had cracked. Her leg bounced uncontrollably. Her lips pressed tight. The judge returned to her seat. "This court finds sufficient evidence," she said, "to suspend consideration of the later will pending a fraud investigation." Vivian's head snapped up. "What?" she whispered. "The trust," the judge continued, "remains valid." I felt my knees weaken. "And based on the evidence presented," she added, "this court refers the matter for criminal review." Vivian stood abruptly. "This is outrageous," she said. "You can't—" "Sit down," the judge said sharply. Vivian collapsed back into her chair. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, there was fear. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Questions were shouted. I walked past them, my ears ringing, the world feeling unreal. Mr. Reynolds walked beside me. "It's not over yet," he said quietly. "But the truth is on your side." I nodded. The house felt different when I returned. Lighter. The walls didn't press in anymore. I went into my father's office and sat in his chair. The leather creaked softly. I looked around. Everything Vivian tried to steal had already been protected. Weeks later, the call came. Vivian had been formally charged: forgery, fraud, attempted concealment of assets. I didn't celebrate. I just sat quietly, letting it settle. Justice doesn't always feel loud. Sometimes it feels like peace. I visited my father's grave that evening. The grass was freshly cut. The air smelled like rain. "I listened," I whispered. "I followed your plan." The wind moved through the trees, and for the first time since he died, I felt steady. But as I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. "This isn't finished." I stared at the screen. Because even with the truth revealed, I knew one thing. Some battles don't end in courtrooms. They end in silence. And I was finally ready for that too. If you're still here, comment your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.